My name is Leticia Maria Sanchez Torres. I am 52 years old, and I have lived my entire life in Guadalajara, Jalisco. I worked for 28 years as an accountant at a medium-sized dairy company, raising my 2 children alone after my husband abandoned us when they were just 4 and 6 years old. They were difficult years, years where every penny counted, where every financial decision kept me up at night. But there was something in my life that I never, absolutely never, stopped doing, no matter how tight the situation was, and that something was my tithe. Every Sunday without fail, I calculated 10% of my salary before paying for anything else and placed it in that white envelope with my name written by hand. It was my pact with God, my spiritual insurance, my way of keeping Him happy with me so He wouldn't take away what little I had. I remember that morning perfectly. It was an ordinary day, with nothing special to distinguish it from any other. I woke up at 6 as usual. I made coffee, checked that my children were ready for work, because they were both adults, but still lived with me while they saved for their own homes. Everything was routine, everything was normal until I felt a strange pain in my chest, as if something were squeezing me from the inside. I thought it was stress. I had been working hard for weeks closing the company's annual financial statements. I drank a glass of water, took deep breaths, but the pain didn't subside. On the contrary, it intensified. Then came the dizziness, my legs giving way, and the last thing I remember before everything went black was my son Daniel's scream calling my name as I fell to the kitchen floor. When I opened my eyes, or rather when my consciousness returned, I was no longer on my kitchen floor. I was floating, watching from above as the paramedics worked on my lifeless body in my living room. I saw Daniel crying, my daughter Gabriella with the phone in her hand talking to someone, her voice breaking with panic. I saw the paramedics' hands pressing my chest. I heard their voices as if they were coming from very far away. No pulse, get the equipment ready, we're going to intubate her. But I didn't feel fear. It was strange. I should have been terrified, but instead, there was a profound calm, as if I could finally rest after decades of constant struggle. Then I felt a presence behind me, a warmth that didn't come from any physical source, but seemed to emanate from the air itself. I turned around and there He was. I didn't need anyone to tell me who He was. I knew immediately. Jesus was standing before me. And His eyes, those eyes that had witnessed all of human history, looked at me with a mixture of love and something else that I couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't anger, it wasn't disappointment in the sense of being upset with me, it was more of a deep sadness, as if something hurt Him to see me. Leticia said my name, and her voice pierced not only my ears, but my entire spirit. Every fiber of my being trembled at the sound of my name on His lips. There is a question you have carried in your heart for years, a question you never dared to ask aloud, and then, unable to contain myself, without the filters we use on earth to appear spiritual, I asked what had truly tormented me in silence for so long. Lord, I whispered, my spiritual voice barely audible. There were months when the money didn't stretch far enough, and I had to skip tithing to buy medicine for my children. There were times I gave 8% instead of 10%, because if I gave the full 10%, we would go without food that week. I disappointed you, didn't I? That's why so many bad things happened to me in life. That's why my husband left. That's why I always struggled so much with money. It was the punishment for not being faithful enough. Tears I didn't know a spirit could shed began to roll down my face. Jesus didn't answer right away. Instead, He asked me another question, a question that completely disarmed me. Leticia, why were you so afraid of me? His voice was so gentle, so full of genuine curiosity and pain that it made me tremble. Fear, the word resonated inside me like a gong. I had never put it that way in my mind. I always called it respect, reverence, fear of God, like they said in church, but Jesus had just named it for what it truly was, pure, simple fear. I just wanted to do the right thing. I stammered. I wanted you to be pleased with me. I wanted you to protect me and my children. I was taught that if I didn't tithe, a curse would come upon my house, and I couldn't risk that. Lord, I had already lost so much, I couldn't lose any more. Jesus extended his hand and touched my spiritual forehead. Suddenly, we were no longer in that ethereal space floating above my dying body. We were in my own house, but it was my house from 15 years ago. I saw myself sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., surrounded by unpaid bills. I saw the electricity bill with the disconnection notice. I saw the prescription the doctor had given Gabriella for her asthma. I saw Danielle's school receipt with the accumulated debt, and there, in the middle of all that financial chaos, was the tithe envelope, already prepared with the bills carefully counted. The Letitia of the past, that younger version of me, with more wrinkles of worry than of age, took the envelope and looked at it for a long time. Then I saw her do something I had forgotten or perhaps had wanted to forget. I saw her open the envelope, take out 2 100-peso bills, look up as if silently asking for forgiveness, and put them in her pocket. Those 200 pesos were for Gabriella's medicine. I saw her hands tremble as she closed the envelope, now with less money than the exact 10%. I saw her kneel right there in the kitchen and pray with a desperation that broke my heart, even as a spirit watching. "My God, forgive me," I heard her whisper between quiet sobs so as not to wake the children. "I don't want to steal from you, but my little girl can't breathe properly. I promised to replace those 200 pesos next month. Please don't punish me. Please don't let anything bad happen to us because of this. Please, God, please." The vision stopped there, and Jesus looked at me with eyes filled with such intense emotion that I could barely hold his gaze. "Letitia," he said, his voice breaking, lightly, "I never, ever asked you to develop that kind of fear. Who taught you to be afraid of me?" And it was like a dam broke inside me. I started speaking, the words pouring out. "The pastors, Lord." Every Sunday I heard about Malachi, chapter 3, verse 10, about bringing all the tithes into the storehouse, about God opening the windows of heaven, but I also heard the other part, the part about the curse, about the devourer that would come if we didn't tithe. I heard testimonies of people who stopped tithing and lost their jobs, they got sick, they had accidents. I was taught that tithing was a covenant, that if I didn't keep my part, God wouldn't keep his. I was taught that it was a spiritual transaction, that I gave and God was obligated to return it to me multiplied, but that if I didn't give, then he also had the right to take away what I already had. Jesus closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them there was something in them that I had never seen in any human being, a mixture of infinite love and profound pain. "They turn my house into a business," he said, and this time his voice had a sharp edge that made me shudder. "They turn my relationship with you into a bank transaction. They made you believe that I am a God who negotiates, who sells protection in exchange for monthly payments, who punishes desperate mothers for caring for their sick children." Letitia, listen to me carefully because I need you to understand this. I was never disappointed in you over those 200 pesos. I was with her that night in your kitchen, holding your broken heart while you prayed, and you know what? It hurt me. It wasn't that you took the money from the envelope, it was that you believed I was the kind of father who would punish your sick daughter because her mother chose to buy her medicine instead of completing a religious fee. The next vision he showed me was even more devastating. It took me to the church on a specific Sunday that I vaguely remembered. It was the congregation's anniversary, and there where I had started a special offering campaign to remodel the church. The pastor had preached with great anointing about sowing in fertile ground, about how offerings given to the house of God generated the greatest blessings. I was sitting there in the third row as usual with my tithe envelope already prepared, but that month had been particularly difficult. I had had to take my car to the mechanic, and the repair cost almost my entire extra budget. Jesus showed me what happened after the sermon. He showed me how I watched other people come forward with generous offerings, how the pastor blessed them publicly, how the whole congregation applauded, and then he showed me something that made me want to disappear in shame. He showed me myself, looking judgmentally at a woman named Socorro, who was sitting a few rows back. Socorro was a single mother like me. She worked cleaning houses, she had 4 children to feed. That Sunday she didn't come forward with any special offering, she just discreetly placed her envelope in the basket as she passed by her line, and I, from my place, judged her. I saw my own face in that memory and saw myself thinking. I could almost hear my thoughts as if they were being spoken aloud. That's why Socorro is always struggling financially. She doesn't sow as she should. If she gave more, God would bless her more. I give my full tithe without fail, and that's why, even though I struggle, God always provides in some way. Jesus paused the memory right there. Letitia said to me gently, "You see what happened here? You yourself, who suffered so much from the burden of tithing, became a judge of others. You put yourself in a position of spiritual superiority because you gave your percentage, without knowing what, Socorro, that week, have chosen between giving an offering or buying milk for her children. She chose her children and went home feeling guilty, feeling she had failed God, and you judged her without knowing her story, perpetuating the same system that imprisoned you." I couldn't respond. Shame consumed me, but Jesus wasn't finished. The third vision was the hardest to witness. It took me back to a moment I had consciously tried to erase from my memory. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office at the company when my boss, Mr. Ramirez, called me in for a private meeting. He was a good man, a Christian too, but from a different denomination, and that day he made me a proposal. Letitia began somewhat uncomfortably. "I know you're a woman of faith and strong principles. I want to propose something to you. We have a problem with this quarter's tax return. If we file everything as is, we'll have to pay a very large amount, big, but if we tweak a few numbers here and there, nothing illegal, technically just taking advantage of certain loopholes, we could significantly reduce that burden. I need you, as my accountant, to help me with that. In return, I'll give you a bonus of 50,000 pesos. I saw my face in that memory. The internal struggle reflected in my eyes. 50,000 pesos was more than I earned in 2 months. With that money, I could pay off all the overdue debts, buy new clothes for the children whose shoes were already worn out, maybe even take a short vacation that we could never afford. But I also knew that what he was asking of me, even though he disguised it as legal, was essentially lying on official documents. For a few eternal seconds, I wrestled with it. Then I replied, "Mr. Ramirez, with all due respect, I'd rather not get involved. I'm a Christian, and I wouldn't feel right doing something like that." My boss nodded with disappointment, but respect, and I left his office feeling proud of my integrity. But then Jesus showed me what happened that very night. He showed me coming home, kneeling by my bed to pray, and hearing my own prayer from that night, a prayer I had completely forgotten. "My God," I prayed, "today I turned down an opportunity to earn extra money because I didn't want to compromise my Christian principles. I did the right thing, even though it hurt, because we needed that money so much. But you see my sacrifice, right, Lord? You see that I put you first, so I ask you, I claim you according to your word, that you bless me for this decision, that you open better doors, that you give me double those 50,000 pesos through another way, because I honored you. That is the covenant. I honor you, and you honor me. I fulfill my obligations to you through my tithe and obedience, and you fulfill yours to me with blessings." That's the message they always preach in church. The vision stopped, and Jesus looked at me with such deep sadness that I wanted to cry. "Music. Did you see what you did?" he asked gently. "Even in your act of apparent integrity, you were negotiating with me. You didn't reject Mr. Ramirez's proposal because you truly cared about truth or justice. You rejected it because you believed I owed you a greater reward if you made that sacrifice. You even turned your obedience into a business transaction. Undo ut des, I give so that you give, and when those financial blessings you claimed didn't arrive when you expected, you felt cheated by me, as if I hadn't held up my end of the bargain. My spiritual tears flowed uncontrollably. Now I was right, everything I said was true, and it hurt to admit it. My entire Christian life had been built on that business foundation. I give, I obey, you bless me, I sacrifice, you reward me. It had never been about genuine love, about pure gratitude, about a real relationship with Him. It's been about keeping my part of the contract so that God would keep His. "Lord," I finally said, my voice breaking, "so everything I did was wrong. All those years tithing, all those sacrifices, It was all garbage. No, Letitia, Jesus replied, taking my face in his hands. Your heart always wanted to do what was right. The problem wasn't you, it was the teachings you received. You were programmed to see me as a stern judge who punishes financial mistakes, as a heavenly banker who processes transactions, but I was never that. I am your father, and as a father, what I always wanted wasn't your money, it was your heart free from fear. And then he showed me something else, something I had never seen. He showed me a woman named Graciela, who, musician, attended the same church as me, but whom I never paid much attention to. Graciela didn't have a steady job, she did odd sewing jobs to survive. I never saw her tithe. In fact, I heard other sisters in the church murmuring about her, saying that's why she lived in poverty, because she didn't honor God with her finances. But Jesus let me see Graciela's real life. He showed me how every week she cooked huge pots of food and took them to a nursing home on the outskirts of Guadalajara. He showed me how she used her sewing skills to mend clothes for free for children from needy families in the neighborhood. He showed me how she prayed for hours every night, not asking for things for herself but interceding for others, by name, with a genuine love that put me to shame. Graciela never tithed a single peso in her life, Jesus said, but every tortilla she cooked for those elderly people, every pair of pants she mended for those children, every prayer she offered for people who didn't even know her, I received all of that as the most beautiful offering, because she did it without expecting a reward, without keeping accounts, without making demands of me, only out of pure love. And then he asked me something that completely shattered me. Letitia, between you, who gave your 10% with fear and secret resentment, and Graciela, who didn't give money but freely gave her time and love, who do you think truly worshipped? I didn't have to answer, we both knew the answer, but, Lord, I managed to ask after a long silence, what about those who use people's tithes to enrich themselves? The pastors who drive luxury SUVs while their congregations starve, those who build religious empires on the backs of people like me, who stayed even if they had nothing, they won't pay for that. Jesus clenched his jaw, and for the first time, I saw something close to anger in his eyes. Each one of them will be held accountable. Letitia, he assured me with a voice that held the weight of eternal justice, those who used my name to manipulate, to enrich themselves, to build earthly kingdoms instead of extending my kingdom, those who burdened my sheep with weights I never placed upon them, believe me, they will answer for every peso misused, for every conscience they trapped in fear, for every person they turned away from me by presenting me as a merchant god. But Letitia, listen carefully, you are not responsible for their mistakes. You cannot control what others did with what you gave, you can only control why you gave it, and there, in that eternal space between life and death, I finally understood that the problem was never the tithe itself, the problem was the fear with which I gave it, the problem was seeing it as an insurance policy instead of an expression of gratitude, the problem was the whole mental framework that had been built around me, where God was a being who had to be appeased with regular payments. Lord, I asked, my voice trembling, and the times I really couldn't give because I literally had nothing. Those months after my husband left and I was unemployed, living off my sister's help, you hated me for that. I was a thief, like they say someone is who doesn't tithe. Jesus looked at me, and his eyes filled with tears. Letitia, he whispered, in those months, when you had nothing and felt so guilty, so ashamed, so sure that I was angry with you. Do you know where I was? I was with you in that bed where you cried silently so your children wouldn't hear you. I was moving your sister's heart to help you, I was opening the door to that job you got later. Not for a second was I keeping track of your tithe debts. That's a human invention, not mine. The word they quote so often from Malachi continued, taken out of context, that message was for corrupt priests in the temple of Israel who were stealing the people's offerings, not for single mothers struggling to feed their children, but it suited them to use it to control people through fear. Then he showed me one last vision, and this one was different. He showed me a future that could have been. He showed me myself living without that constant burden of guilt. He showed me giving when I could, with genuine joy, without keeping accounts or expecting calculated rewards. He showed me using my money to help people in need directly without it going through any institution. He showed me praying, not from fear, but from love. He showed me a version of myself that I never became because I was too caught up in religiosity. That could have been your life, Jesus said wistfully, free, joyful, generous, not out of obligation, but out of overflowing love. But that freedom was stolen from you with distorted teachings. And then I asked what I was truly terrified to know, Lord, what now? Am I going to hell because I had the wrong motivations, because I judged others? Because I turned my relationship with you into a business? Jesus smiled, and it was like seeing the sun rise after the darkest night. Letitia, do you believe in me? Yes, Lord, I answered without hesitation. I always believed in you. Then you are saved, he said simply, not because of your tithe, not because of your works, not because of your perfect percentage of donations. You are saved because you believe in me, because in the midst of all the wrong teachings, in the midst of all the fear and confusion, your heart always sought me, clumsy, scared, confused, but he always sought me out, and that's enough. But, Lord, I insisted, then, why did you show me all this if I'm already saved? So that you will return, he answered, and tell the truth. Return, I repeated, confused. Jesus pointed down, where my body was still being worked on by the paramedics. They had already been trying to revive me for 18 minutes. The doctors were about to declare me dead. But I'm not finished with you, Letitia. You are going to return because I need you to be my voice. I need you to set others free who are trapped in the same prison where you lived. I need you to teach that I don't want 10% of anyone's money. I want 100% free hearts that truly love me, that give generously when they can, not out of fear, but out of love, that they understand that my grace cannot be bought or sold. My spiritual heart was filled with a purpose I had never felt before. I will do whatever you ask, Lord, but I am afraid. What if they reject me? What if they call me a heretic? What if they expel me from the church? Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. You will probably be rejected by some, you will probably be called all sorts of names, you will probably lose religious friendships, but you will gain something far more valuable. You will gain true freedom and help others gain it as well, and I will be with you every step of the way. You will not be alone. Then he touched my spiritual chest and suddenly I felt a tremendous tug, like a giant bungee cord pulling me back. 1 second I was floating in peace. The next I was being sucked back into that shattered body. The pain returned instantly, every nerve screaming, my lungs burning, and then my heart beat once, twice. We have a pulse, I heard someone shout. We have a pulse, holy God, we have a pulse. It took me 4 days to fully wake up in the hospital. When I finally opened my eyes, Daniel and Gabriella were on either side of my bed, their faces gaunt from lack of sleep and stress. Mom, Gabriella said, grabbing my hand, we thought we had lost you. You lost me, I whispered hoarsely. For 18 minutes you lost me, but Jesus sent me back, and I spent the next hour telling you everything, every vision, every word of Jesus, every painful truth I had uncovered about my own distorted faith. My children cried with me, laughed with me, and when I finished, Daniel said something I will never forget. Mom, I always admired you for your faith, but I also always saw how you tormented yourself over tithing, how sometimes we didn't eat well so we would have enough for the Sunday envelope. I hated that as a child. I hated that God seemed more important than us. I'm glad to know it wasn't God who was asking for that, it was the people speaking in his name. Those words broke me and healed me at the same time. I never knew my children had seen and felt all of that. I never knew the damage my fear-based religiosity had caused them. But now I had the opportunity to teach them differently. I spent the next few months in physical and spiritual recovery. The first thing I did was look for Socorro, the woman I had silently judged. I went to her house, knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I asked for her forgiveness. Socorro, I said with tears in my eyes, I judged you without knowing you. I thought your financial situation was because you didn't give enough to the church. I was so wrong, and I ask for your forgiveness. Socorro hugged me and cried with me. "Thank you, Letitia," she whispered. "You don't know how many times I felt less than others in the church for not being able to give more." We spent hours talking, and I discovered that she, too, had lived under that same burden of guilt for not meeting exact percentages. I also sought out Graciela, the woman Jesus had shown me. I told her about my experience and said something I needed to say. "Graciela," I said, "the Lord showed me your life, and it shamed me. You, who never tithed, live closer to Jesus than I do. Even though I gave it religiously for decades, you taught me, without knowing it, what it means to give from love and not from fear." Graciela smiled with that peace that only people who truly know God possess, without the layers of religiosity. Letitia replied, "I stopped feeling guilty about not tithing years ago. I asked God to show me what He wanted from me, and He showed me the forgotten elderly in that nursing home, so I cook for them. It's not money, but it's what I have to give, and that fills me more than any envelope in a basket." Then came the hardest part, talking with my pastor. I asked for a private meeting and told him my whole story. His reaction was exactly what Jesus had anticipated. Sister Letitia told me with a worried tone, "I think that experience was a deception of the enemy. Satan disguises himself as an angel of light to confuse believers. Tithing is a non-negotiable biblical commandment. What you're saying could cause other people to stop tithing, and that would bring a curse upon them and upon you for being a stumbling block." I tried to explain that I wasn't saying that tithing shouldn't be done, but rather that it shouldn't be done out of fear or seeing God as a merchant, but he wouldn't listen. In the end, he suggested that I not share my testimony with anyone else in the congregation so as not to cause confusion. When I politely declined, telling him that I felt called to share what Jesus had shown me, his tone changed. "Then we'll have to ask you to consider finding another congregation," he said firmly. "We can't allow these kinds of divisive teachings to spread in our church." I left that church without anger, only with sadness. Sadness because I knew there were many others that trapped in the same fear I had lived in, but also with peace because I was finally free. My children and I found a small community that met in homes, where the focus was on genuinely knowing Jesus and not fulfilling religious quotas. There I learned what it meant to give from joy and not from obligation. Some months we gave a lot because we couldn't wanted to, other months we gave little because money was tight, and no one ever made us feel less spiritual for it. If you're listening to this right now, I need you to understand something crucial. Jesus isn't angry with you for the months you couldn't tithe. He isn't keeping track of your spiritual debts. He isn't going to punish you for choosing to feed your children instead of fulfilling a percentage. He loves you. He loves you more than you can understand, and that love can't be bought with money, earned through works, or depended on your ability to meet religious quotas. In John chapter 8, verse 32, Jesus said, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The truth is that God is your loving Father, not your creditor. The truth is that your salvation comes through faith in Christ, not through tithe percentages. That truth is that giving generously is beautiful when it flows from a grateful heart, but it's imprisonment when it comes from fear or manipulation. If your church teaches that God will curse you if you don't give exactly 10%, if they tell you that every problem in your life is because you're not tithing correctly, if they use fear as a tool to extract money, then they aren't teaching the gospel of Jesus. They're selling a religious product. And Jesus himself overturned the merchant's tables in the temple because his house was not a place of commerce. Now I am 52 years old, but I feel like I am only just beginning to truly live. I live lighter, freer, more full of genuine love for God and for others. I give when I can, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but always with joy. I directly help people in need without expecting my generosity to earn me points with God. I pray without fear, like a daughter speaking to her father, not like a debtor trying to appease her creditor. And every day I thank Jesus for loving me enough to show me the truth, however painful it was. If this story touched something in your heart, if you identified with that struggle, with that fear, with that constant guilt, write Amen in the comments. Share this video with 3 people you know who need to hear this message, not so they stop giving, but so they can give free from fear. Subscribe to the channel because I will continue sharing the truth of the gospel without the religious distortions that have imprisoned us for so long. Remember this, Jesus doesn't want 10% of your money. Jesus wants your heart free from fear. He wants a genuine relationship with you, not a business transaction. He wants you to give generously when you can, not out of obligation, but out of love, and above all, He wants you to know that His love for you never, absolutely never, depends on how much money you put in a basket on Sundays. That is the truth that set me free. That is the truth I hope will set you free too. May God bless you, fill you with His peace, and reveal to you the true love that has no price or percentage. A love that is already yours in Christ Jesus, without conditions, without quotas, without fear, only pure love. Amen.